Press the record. Okay, so just so long as you're all aware that that's happening. It's a shame our guest speaker wasn't able to be here tonight, had to cancel because of a close bereavement. But on the plus side, it means we do have extra time for our discussion tonight. I'd now like to welcome and introduce Mel Osborne-Smith, who is the single candidate from Junction Ward who's able to participate tonight. Di Gillies had RSVP'd. She was intending to come, but just pulled out late this afternoon due to a family issue that had arisen and prevented her attending. So I want to thank all of you for being here tonight and congratulate you for being active citizens in our local democracy. As David read out from Jono's letter, it is hugely important and worthwhile for citizens like us to inform ourselves about how council works and to hear from candidates, and also to let them know how we wish to be represented by them. Now I'll quickly explain how it works. As Mal is the only candidate here tonight and we don't want to completely exhaust him, you know, if we finish early, we'll finish early. The plan is that I'll give Mal 5 minutes or so to introduce himself to you, explain why he has decided to stand as a candidate, and then he'll have some time to answer a few questions that climate-focused questions that we've already given him. I'll put those to him and he can answer each one. And then we'll move on to questions from you, the audience. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask Mal, please put them in the chat, and we will get on to those questions after the first 4 that Mal's already expecting. Then at the end, we might, David and I will be monitoring the questions in the chat, and if we see a few that are kind of along a similar theme, we might group a few together. We might ask some exactly as you've written them word for word, but we'll try and get a bit of a variety and keep things going so that we can cover a good bit of ground. I think that's it. Have I missed anything, David, or?
I don't think so. As far as I remember, you've covered it all.
Yep. Okay. All right, Mal. Well, if you're ready, I'll hand over to you and invite you to, first of all, explain or introduce yourself and explain your reasons for standing for council.
Okay. Thank you very much, Julia. You can hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Julia and David and the Lighter Footprints team for this opportunity to present myself to you and your members tonight. It's a great initiative, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I'm newish to the world of environment, and I feel a little humbled in the presence of many people here tonight that have spent, you know, considerable time professionally and personally in advocating for the environment. So let me start by perhaps saying that part of my journey, hopefully to council, will be a lot of listening and learning, but I'll do my best to explain my reason for running and to answer some of the questions being put to me, and to do my best to answer questions from the audience. So kicking off, the question was put to me, why am I running? Well, here's the reason. I think it's well and truly time to rejuvenate the Junction. It's time for action. We've had years of planning dating right back to 2002, and our most recent Junction plan started well over 4 years ago. And in my view, too little has been done in those years. The Junction is tired, it's dated. There are a number of retailers that are failing. George's has just closed, by the way. There are some ghost sites, you know, undeveloped sites up and down Burke Street. I think the fresh food market is in poor shape. The car parking is cluttered. I think we have poor pedestrian amenity, and we've got some safety issues. I think the Junction is in need of rejuvenation. Now, added, of course, to the current situation in the Junction is this new challenge presented to us by state government with rather excessive demands for housing in the order of 67,000 houses in the Junction area over the next 25 years. So we've got a bit on our plate in the Junction. But I think the Junction can be absolutely world class. There is no reason we can't make the Junction a place that invites and inspires and is truly a fine example of a great civic place in our city. There are opportunities everywhere. We should be building new parks and plazas. And of course, that would include the Camberwell Market Plaza, the Camberwell Green, which I support immensely. We can activate our laneways by bluestone pavers, by landscaping, by artwork on the walls, by safety lighting. We should have a Christmas night market to activate the space, the car park space in the evenings. We can widen our footpaths to create proper 6 metre wide footpaths, allowing greater pedestrian amenity, restaurants to trade onto the streets. We can create some spaces for our buskers to perform and entertain. We can do fairy lights. Why not? In some of our grand trees. We could even do heritage lights in the Junction. We can improve our car parking, and there's a whole study in that to come. But I think many of us would agree it's cluttered and confusing at times. There's opportunities, including, for example, the decommissioning.
It's all good.
Am I okay to continue? There's opportunities, for example, to decommission the old Tramsway building, which was an opportunity given to the council some years ago and not taken up. That's the big building, of course, right outside Aldi, that's currently used as a substation for the Tramways Board, and it could be potentially decommissioned and converted into a community space such as a ground floor cafe, an art gallery, etc. So there's a bunch I think we can do in the Junction. Not all of them have to be, massive expensive schemes. Some of them can be very simple, and we should just get on with it, because what we have to do in essence is to prepare for people coming to live in the Junction. Whether we like it or not, there will be some thousands of new residents over the next decade or more living in the Junction, whether it's the extreme that state government are seeking, or whether it's the more modest proposal in the Junction plan that's been put together by council. I think we need to accept that more people will come to live in the Junction. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think we need to prepare for that. We don't want to be at Docklands waiting for towers to be built and then scratching around wondering why we don't have some open spaces, some parks, some pocket parks, etc., for people to dwell and connect in. We need to get on with that stuff now. So my background, I'm formerly a planning lawyer for a number of years. I'm from the property profession, and I spent years in developing and managing shopping centres and activity centres in Australia and also overseas. I spent some time in Hong Kong, China and England. And part of my work there was bringing retail concepts to some big projects there. I've consulted to the City of Melbourne for the Queen Victoria Market project. So I love markets, a good one. And I'm really passionate about urban design and, the quality design and the benefits that can bring to community. So that's a bit about my background. I'm currently running a business called Three Doors, which is specialises actually in restoring old Victorian heritage shops to create shop top dwellings above the shop. So rather than the big empty spaces that you see if you drive up and down Perk Road or Glenferrie Road and you look up and you see those dusty old windows and a couple of curtains blowing in the breeze, my business aims to turn that space, that vacant space or that underutilised space above shops into affordable residence and activate the streets. From a community perspective, I have, I think, a strong commitment to my local community. I was a scout leader for 3 or 4 years. I was president of the Parents Association at Glen Iris Primary School, which I ran some 30-odd events for the school, including fundraising events. I'm involved in local sports clubs, etc., with my kids, Ashy Redbacks, the cricket club, the like. I live locally in Glen Iris. I love what the Friends of Gardeners Creek do, and I volunteer at Electrify Boroondara, and I have for the last 2 years, and congrats to those who helped run that wonderful initiative. And so in summary, why am I running? I think I'm at the personal age that I still have energy and insight and a desire to make a real difference in the Junction. I've I believe I've got the right professional background, and I'm not a part of any party politics. I just want to have a crack at making a difference in the Junction for 4 years, see if I can make some of these improvements for us all, and then sort of move on. So that's why I'm running. I'm sorry if it went over a bit more than a minute.
That's okay, Mel. Thank you. You've given us a good explanation, I think, and description of your interests and your ideas. So thank you. So I'll move on to the second question now, and it's a climate one. Do you think councillors should play a more significant leadership role in the community when it comes to climate change? And if so, what would that entail?
Great question. Let me have a go at answering it, first of all, from a overall perspective, and then perhaps some of the details on some ideas I might address, if I may, in answering or responding to your second question, which invites me to suggest some new initiatives. But look, in summary about leadership in government and council, my view is simply this. Climate science is undeniable. I mean, we all know that. And I think, to quote Tim Walz in the US election, anyone who doesn't think of that as a reality is a knucklehead. So I think we've all moved on. The vast majority of society has moved on from any debate about the science of climate. Now our role in our community is to address it. We all know our climate is changing, rapidly and potentially destructively, and has been since the Industrial Revolution. And we've got the big challenge of our generation to pull, millions of tons of carbon out of the atmosphere, and to reduce the impact of a changing environment on our society and our landscape environment. So we all need to be part of the environmental movement to a net zero and beyond. Many would say, and a lot of doors I've knocked on, and people would say, "Oh, what's council doing in environment?" I mean, it's a state or a federal issue. At best, it's probably more an international issue. What difference will 5 electric cars, at council make, etc.? We're really not going to move the dial, and frankly, of course, we're not in global terms, and we need to accept that. But I say the following: I think, when I think about the roles of government, one of the most powerful roles government at all levels should have is attitudinal change. Using the powers of local government to change society's attitudes to certain things. That, in my opinion, is one of the most powerful things that government can do. We're not the private sector. We don't have billions of dollars at our disposal. We don't have huge levers to move in many other areas. But one of the key things that we ought to do every time councillors sit and meet together and discuss what they can do for the city is one of them is to, I believe, lead attitudinal change. So if you look at some government initiatives like, the anti-smoking campaign, whether you look at initiatives like the new one, like domestic violence, drink driving, even back to the 70s with Norm and Life Be In It, these are all campaigns that, to governments of both persuasions and all levels have engaged in and have literally changed society's views about those things. Reconciliation is perhaps the more topical one now, and let's hope gambling comes into it as well. We're way behind on that. We need to pull our finger out real quick and ban gambling ads. That's another day.
So just to interrupt a bit there, Mel, so do you see councillors as having a role in leading this attitudinal change locally?
That is one of their major roles, yes, to lead by example, and to do what they can to educate and influence and change attitudes or bring attitudes of society along with them. So that's the starting point about council's role, I think. Now, when you drop down and look at what council's done over a number of years, I would have to say that on balance, there's been some excellent work done. Of course, we're all aware of the climate plan that's recently been, climate action plan that's recently been enacted. There's the biodiversity plan. And when I read through all the projects that councils put their finger on, I think there's some great work there. So I'd like to hope Boroondara sits pretty well amongst many councils in terms of work they're doing. I've got some suggestions about more that we can do, but perhaps I'll leave it at that, if I may, Julia, and just say that, from my perspective, one of our major jobs as government is to lead by example and try to change attitudes.
Okay, thank you. Mel, you mentioned the Climate Action Plan. So if you are elected, what new initiative would you propose to include in Council's next Climate Action Plan to help Boroondara residents reduce their carbon emissions?
I've got 5 goodies for you. I hope you like them. Let me run through them if I may. They're all on my website if anyone had the time or interest to sort of look there in more detail. But let me run through them. The first thing I'd like to do is what I'm calling green curtains. Okay, now this is my term. I've just made it up, but really it's a step change in how we plant and improve our tree canopy. And it's by mass planting along the back sides of fences on linear parks. So I live in the Ferndale Park area. I spend many hours a week walking our linear trails, perhaps like many of us do. And it annoys me every step I take when I look up and see the back of a residential fence. I hope I'm not offending anyone who may live on, who have the luxury of living on, backing onto a linear park. But my point is that we don't need to see a fence. We can plant out 2 or 3 meters wide along all of our fence lines for miles of linear parks, and in doing so add dramatically to the tree canopy targets that we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve a 20% tree canopy target. We should, I think, be able to smash 30% if we plant extensively along our fence lines and create what I call the green curtains of Boroondara. It would have a number of benefits, I believe. I should add that the green curtains and the planting doesn't need to be all tall trees and blocking views. It can be low shrubs and the like. But if you could imagine a world where we walk along these linear paths and we do not see a fence, or we really don't even see a house, but we see a curtain of forest on either side of our trails, I think that would be absolutely marvelous. You'd actually transport yourself mentally into a forest rather than feeling like you're walking along an old drain reserve. The benefits are numerous. We're obviously adding dramatically, I think, to the biomass of trees and shrubs. As I said, we're providing that urban forest effect, I believe. We're hiding the back of ugly, I think, mostly ugly fences from the public. You might see a number with graffiti and broken fence palings. I don't think we need to see them. And the easiest way to do it is just to plant them out. By the way, we should be planting out noise walls along freeways as well. I see no reason why we should have to drive along kilometres of concrete noise walls when we could plant vines up them. Another story. We can also add to the privacy of the residents, so we're not looking into their lounge rooms. And we can also save a bit of space, bit of greenery, bit of open space for grass. If you see some of the planting that councils have done, they're random, they're sporadic. They plant 6 gum trees in the middle of a green meadow, and that's their contribution to tree canopy. It doesn't really move the dial. It's only 6 trees, but what will happen is it's just another piece of grass that we don't get to sit on or play with the dog or whatever. We can push a lot of those tree planting to the fence line, add more trees, and still save a bit of open space. And of course, there's the benefits to wildlife, as we've discussed. So that's one of my ideas, the green curtains. I better speed up. Sorry, I'm taking a little bit too long here.
And if you can kind of that was great. Ideas to help residents reduce their carbon emissions too, if you've got one of those in.
Yeah, got one of those. Renovators op shop is number 2. The construction industry is the most wasteful and environmentally destructive industry in the country, if not the world. I think we all, certainly in my professional experience, I see tons of construction waste going into skip bins every day, and it goes to landfill. It is awful, it's heartbreaking, and it ought not happen. 27 million tonnes in Australia are dumped every year, which is something like 44% of all waste. It's terrible. What I would propose, I would advocate for, is something like a renovators op shop. So when we finish using 2 of those nails in the pack of 400 nails that we had to buy from Bunnings, rather than leaving it sitting in our shed for the next 4 years till we never use it again, we could take it down to a council-run renovators op shop, leave it there for someone else to come and pick up and use. We could do the same with our old tiles or paint or timber or on you go. So it would need to be well organised. It would need to have a deposit system where you paid to drop off your leftover things, so that if it was never used, your deposit would be forfeited and it could be tipped in time. Perhaps it could be staffed by volunteers. Perhaps it could be connected to like a men's shed. We'd need to find a bit of space. Maybe it could be part of the existing transfer station. But I would like to take the op shop world, the reduce, the reuse, the recycle mantra into a renovators op shop. That's idea number 2. Carbon footprint idea number 3 is to encourage better reuse of existing buildings. So again, in my industry, I think it's absolutely appalling that far too many decent buildings are demolished and replaced with a new building. The carbon footprint that is impacted because of the demolition of materials that go to landfill and the manufacture of new materials to build a new house is awful and wasteful. And I think our development community, our property owner community should be encouraged to do more with old buildings. So perhaps a way we could do that is get in earlier in the planning process. For those of you who have built and renovated, you know that the way it works at the moment is you buy a block of land, you go off to your designer or your architect, 2 or 3 months later and 10 grand later, you present something to council in the hope that they'll approve it. My view is if we get in earlier with council, we set up a design facilitation committee before you even prepare your designs. That could be a great opportunity to say, hey, what about you look at a design that reuses the existing building you've bought? Hey, what about you design and present something to council that keeps the tree in the front yard before you demolish it, you pull out the tree? What about you design a building that actually is got, is better environmentally, with better insulation, better shade on roofs, etc. So I would think council could invest a little bit of extra money and work at the beginning of the planning process to help educate perhaps a lot of our new citizens who are moving to Boroondara from other countries, and help move the dial a little bit in attitudinal change to say, hey, using an old building ain't such a bad idea, or renovating an old building, and here's some designs that you might like to think about to improve the quality of your development. That's idea 3. I've got one more if I'm not taking up too much time.
If you can make this one a bit quicker, please.
Sure. An audit of our council buildings. So council's pretty quick to say what we're doing on our new buildings, solar panels, etc. The fact is council own thousands or many hundreds of buildings and properties throughout Boroondara. And to my knowledge anyway, there has been no audit done of all of those properties as to their environmental efficiency standards. Now, it's very common practice in the property industry to audit buildings, even an old shed or a storage facility or a car park. They can all be audited. So I think it would be wise for council to spend a bit of money on a proper audit, and then each of those properties can have a plan to improve their efficiency. Now, some might be as simple as, a bit of extra insulation or draft proofing, etc. Some, frankly, might not be worth spending money on at all because they're maybe at the end of their life cycle. But at the moment, council doesn't know that. So I would like to see that in the next reiteration of the climate plan, an audit of all council buildings. The only other one I wanted to add was better use of synthetic materials for roads. That's idea number 5. It's been trialled in Stonington at the moment, and that's reusing recycled plastics to improve the composite of our road making materials. I know a bit of work's been done by council on that. I think we can do more. So there's, if that helps, Julia, five ideas I'd like to see in the next round of the climate plan. Great,
thanks, Mel. Really clearly explained. That's great. We've got one more question and then we'll move on to audience questions. We've kind of touched on this a little bit already. It says community engagement is key to encouraging community action on climate change. How can council better engage with residents and businesses on this issue? You've mentioned leading by example, educating, creating attitudinal change. I guess, do you have any ideas on, how you'd go about that, how that engagement with residents would happen?
Yeah, I've got two ideas I'd like to share with the group. The first is, and these are practical and simple, right? You know, so the first is a drainage awareness program I've come across called Yellow Fish. It's in New Zealand. Perhaps some of your listeners might even know it. It's the most simple and beautiful public engagement campaign I've seen for ages. It is it is designed to educate the public about our wastewater, our drainage systems. Our drains, of course, drain to our rivers directly, our creeks and our rivers. And yet, a staggering amount of people don't appreciate that what goes down the drain ends up in Gardeners Creek or the Yarra or the sea. We don't have enough swale drains to catch that rubbish. We don't have enough rubbish nets and the like to filter that. More importantly, I think too much rubbish and too much stuff goes down the drains in the first place. And we've all seen that as we walk up and down our creeks, you know, the plastic bags floating in the trees, the coffee cups, the foam, the polystyrene, etc. So this program's called Yellow Fish. We can call it what we like. And it is simply this: a painted yellow fish stencil on the top of the drain plates, reminding people that this is a public drain that flows to our creeks and rivers. Another iteration of this could have an arrow and perhaps the name of the creek, for example, to Gardeners Creek. It's a stencil and it's a spray paint. It's that cheap and that easy and quite neat and lovely. And yet if that appeared on thousands of our drains around Boroondara, it couldn't help but remind everyone as they walked up and down their streets that this drain is not a cavity of where all rubbish and things should go. It is, in fact, a direct conduit to our rivers and our sea. In New Zealand, they use school kids to do it, which could be fun. Anyway, that's one example I'd like to see happen in Boroondara for community engagement on at least drainage awareness. The second one, and perhaps I'll finish on this one, Julia, is a method to get a message out. We've got a Butte website, and if you explore that in detail, there's lots in there. But most people, let's be honest, don't spend a lot of time on the Boroondara website. What they do every day, our residents, at least every week, is wheel out and wheel in our rubbish bins. By the thousands, by the tens of thousands. We own the rubbish bins, we manage the contractors, and I think our rubbish bin lids, perhaps on the inside of the lids, is a perfect advertising board to educate the community, engage with the community about environmental issues. We could produce, recyclable stickers that could be stuck on the inside of the lid. They could be updated every year or every 6 months. We could throw all of that responsibility onto the contractors, the rubbish contractors to do. And that little note could talk about something like the Yellow Fish campaign, or it could talk about, lighter footprints meetings, or whatever. There would be an unending list of environmental issues we could educate our community by, simply by a sticker, an advertising sticker on the inside of our rubbish bin. So they're two examples that I've come up with, which are pretty simple, pretty cheap, and might just make a difference.
Okay. Thanks very much, Mel. If you need to have a glass of water,
I'm good. I'm good. Okay. I can talk underwater.
Okay.
I'm done.
We've got about 8 questions, I think, in the chat. So thanks everyone for putting your questions in. I'll hand over to David now. He's going to go through the questions, and ideally, what is it now? It's after 8:15. We're meant to be finishing at 9 at the latest. So if it'd be good if we could get all the questions answered. So just bear that in mind, Mel. At this stage, we've got about 8 questions. Over to you, David.
Yep. Okay. And I might say that one of the questions is, are we going to be able to get through all these questions? So I would reinforce that. But the first one is, what is your view on the proposed activity centre to increase development to meet housing targets and double the dwellings in Boroondara?
It's massive overreach. It's a ham-fisted approach by state government with a noble goal, but ill-conceived and rushed. I'm a little cynical of it. It's been launched by state government at the beginning of the school holidays. It's had a very limited public consultation period. It was launched right at council election time, where councils have moved into caretaker mode. So for anyone who might have attended the urban planning meeting last night, council have done some rapid and considerable work in responding to this plan from state government, and full credit to the council officers who have prepared a response from Boroondara. I support the council response. It is overreach. 67,000 homes in the next 20 years will, within 800 metres of the junction, will potentially dramatically alter our residential and heritage footprint in that area forever. And if you think of the 60s, block of apartments that we have sprinkled through some suburbs, potentially we're looking at a new cycle of that. The quality of buildings may be dramatically reduced because of the lack of appeal rights, and the haste with which those projects can be approved by state government. There's no limited opportunity for residents to respond to those designs, and potentially could have dramatic impacts on our heritage and our streetscapes, I might add, and our biodiversity and our tree canopy. I do, however, think that broadly our activity centre can accommodate more people. I think the council junction plan is pretty good. It's 1,500 homes or thereabouts in the heart of the activity centre, with medium density towers. So I broadly support the council plan. I think the state government plan is overreach, in summary, and we need to do what we can to resist it. But more importantly, we need to do what we can to prepare for it. I mean, at the end of the day, the state government manages the Planning Environment Act. They have the power to do this. Unless we vote them out of government, they will, and they may well rezone our activity centres, and Camberwell's the pilot project. But what we need to do, I think, at a council level is get on with at least preparing for a level of population increase in the coming years.
Okay, that's about a
Okay,
couple
thank you
of
very
minutes.
much. Oh, so perhaps quickly following on from that, that theme, have you had any contact with state government officials on this subject, or to find out if they could help us with any issues?
No, the only person I met is a lady who was part of the community reference group.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fine. There's one also related to dwelling demolitions, which I know you've spoken about your scheme, but there's a question here about the need to retain heritage dwellings. And do you support retention of dwellings and heritage retention as part of climate change? Now, you've spoken a bit on this, but do you have anything to add?
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, the question relates to heritage buildings as part of an environmental platform rather than heritage for other reasons. So I'm a strong supporter of heritage properties for heritage sake, for preserving our history. But from an environmental point of view, I guess it gets back, David, to using what we have, reducing demolition and rebuilding, to modify and adapt. And we as a development community, or the development community, I should say, have the tools in their toolbox to do better with existing buildings. It's too simplistic to knock over a building for 40 grand and try to build a new building. We have the ability to do better with what we have. So yes, to answer that question, we should be saving our heritage properties. We should be resetting them where appropriate for the next 50 years of their life. We can't live in museums, but buildings can be updated, they can be modified, they can be insulated, they can be made far more efficient with double glazing, even heritage windows, etc. And perhaps many of your viewers tonight have been through that journey. Certainly I have. So yeah, let's save them, let's reuse them, and let's reduce rebuilding where possible.
All right. Thank you very much. The next one is, given online shopping, there are many vacant shops. How can we revitalise the junction so it does not continue to have this number of vacant shops and buildings?
Oh, great question. Right to my heart. Thank you for whoever asked that. Yeah, it's heartbreaking when you see a hardworking retailer go out of business. It gives no joy to anyone to see a failed business, not the staff, not the operators of the business, not the owner of the business, and certainly not the public who might well have been enjoying that business and certainly walk past up and down that street daily and see an empty building or an empty shop. To answer how we deal with the rise of online shopping and the reactivation of the high street, here's my view, and it's one born out from 20 years of professional work in this. I own half a dozen shops in strips, or I have over the years. I care deeply about the high street. And my view is that there is a future for high street retail, despite the Chadstones and the mega shopping centres of the world, and despite online retailing. And that is because there is an increasing demand from residents to shop and work close to where they live. And as traffic intensifies and cities get bigger, the village effect can be made to work. There is ample evidence to support that people much prefer to buy their groceries within 800 metres or a kilometre of where they live and not drive miles to do a supermarket shop or get their hair cut, etc. So there is a business for our retail shops if we get it right. Now, there's a couple of factors that impact that. One is rent. Rents are very high for some retailers and disproportionately high. I won't go into the economics of sort of rent caps and all that. I don't really believe well, certainly council don't have the power to do that anyway. But what I would suggest to help keep the costs down for the retailers, and usually rent is the biggest factor in a retailer's business. If you have occupancy costs, what's called occupancy costs, which is the amount it costs you to occupy your space, if it's 20, 30, 40% of your gross takings, you're going out of business. It doesn't matter how good your coffee is, how beautifully you cut someone's hair. If you're paying 40 cents in every dollar to use that space, you're in trouble. Now, what I would like to encourage council to do is to encourage landlords, owners of buildings, to use their buildings more efficiently. I've talked already about shop top dwellings. If we were able to fast track approvals for residences above shops, then while people might react and say, oh my God, you're just helping make landlords, richer. In fact, you're providing a more efficient use of their building, which potentially generates more income and enables the shop to pay less, because that will save businesses. So answer number one to your question, more efficient use of buildings, existing buildings, I believe. Number two, I'd like to do what we can at council to reactivate our high strips. So I've talked about footpaths, real simple, a flat bluestone paver footpath that's 4 or 5 metres wide, not necessarily right up and down Burke Road or every road, but in sections, can dramatically impact the ability of a retailer to trade profitably. Think about a cafe with on-street dining. Option one, a buckled bitumen road that has one little sort of chair and table right next to a car parks, or option two, a nice wide footpath. For example, up near the train station on the north side of Camberwell train station. Terrific job there. So wider footpaths. Cleaning up our buildings is another way we can do it. It's very hard for landlords of buildings to actually repaint and do the old verandas and even flood their buildings with light. It takes a fortune in permits, footpath closures, traffic management plans, etc. The amount of effort and cost you have to go through just to clean up your building is an indictment on councils all around Melbourne. I've been part of that. What we could do at council is to say, right, traders and owners of properties in, say, Burke Road or this section of Camberwell Road or Rivervale Road, let's give you 6 months to upgrade your building. We're going to look after traffic management for you. We're going to, fast track your permits. We're even going to, reduce your rates for a couple of years or whatever it is. But we would like you to commit to a scheme to refresh or regenerate the outside of your building, make it watertight, get rid of the graffiti, maybe flood it with lights, etc. So bit by bit, we could, over time, with a simple scheme, a bit of contribution from council, work with the landlords and the tenants to reactivate and beautify their buildings. I
That's
think I'll
about
leave
4
it at that
minutes.
for the moment.
That's
There's
about 4
lots we can
minutes
do.
now on that one. Yep.
Yeah.
I haven't got onto marketing, but there's lots that can be done with the retail traders associations to bring people in. But marketing is often a bit of a short-term fix. I'll have a big event, great, lots of people turn up. The reality is it's everyday traders and everyday expenditure that makes a difference to those retail businesses. One final thing I might add is these what I call ghost sites, which we all hate. Think of Sophia's, that beautiful old bank next to Sophia's restaurant that's been a derelict site for decades. There's 2 or 3 near me on Camberwell Road. We could do better at council, locking heads together with the owners and the occupiers of those buildings to say, listen, we don't like the ghost site. This terrible old demolished site that's sitting there with cobwebs and rats and the like is not on. It might be your building, but it sits in Burke Road and it is viewed and could be loved by thousands of residents, and it's all owned by us a little bit in part. So I think we should have a carrot and stick approach. We should be saying to these owners, listen, you've got to sort this out, and we're going to give you 3 years to do it or 2 years to do it. And if you do, great, we might look at some rate abatement or some incentive. And if you don't, we're going to charge you a vacant land tax that's going to make it really unprofitable for you to sit on this empty site. I think there are some tools that we can look at to try to get rid of these, get these ghost sites moving.
If we can move on to the next question, please,
Sure.
David.
Okay, thank you. And Mel, I know you've partially answered this. Maybe you have fully answered it, so I'll ask it. But no need to repeat. These questions were put in before you started talking.
No problem.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to consider climate impacts, particularly summer temperature and biodiversity in Camberwell, resulting from the activity centre and catchment plans, which will effectively clear trees and vegetation across an 800-metre radius from the junction?
Yeah, it's a good question. And to be fair, I haven't considered that issue in detail. I can simply observe that a building's footprint on a parcel of land that expands dramatically on the current building's footprint inevitably leads to a loss of tree canopy cover. And it's heartbreaking to see these sites, these houses that are cleared, knocked down, and every blade of grass and every tree on that block is nuked, ready for a new home to be built. And the same would happen in this activity centre area within the 800-metre radius on new projects, simply because the footprint to be taken up by these new apartment blocks would be so dramatic that there's very little opportunity for green cover. So yes, the heat map will rise inevitably. And this is one of the issues that state government hasn't thought through. They're pro-green, they're pro-tree canopy, and yet they're carte blanche allowing potentially thousands of large buildings to be built on ever decreasing sizes of parcels of land, and as a result, a loss of tree canopy. I've tried to address tree canopy a little bit with my green curtain idea.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
it's a big issue. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Another one, have you given any thought to how council can encourage people to leave their car at home and safely cycle in local areas for day-to-day activities?
Oh, I love this question too. This is great. Yes, I have, and I think about cycle amenity tremendously. I'm a keen cyclist myself. And I've got to say, I just love this world that we're moving in to of a interconnected bike network. We've got to just keep getting on with it. I think, to me, the issue in shared paths, let's not call them bike paths, because they are shared paths for pedestrians as well. Although in very busy arterial routes like those along Gardeners Creek and the Yarra Creek, they ought to be separated in time. But leaving that aside, I think the big issue for me is connecting bike paths. It's not a new rubbish bin here or there, or a new pump tyre set or a light or dots on the road. To me, we should be spending all of our energy at council connecting our paths so that there is a network of bike paths that can take a cyclist on a genuine journey from one place to another. One that's nearby to me is the potential Ferndale to Frog Hollow bike path. Now, at the moment, for those of you who might know the area, the Ferndale path just stops at Denman Street. There is easily the opportunity to connect it with a bridge over Gardeners Creek, an underpass under Toorak Road, reusing an old easement on the side of the Toyota car sales lot, and then joining it to the Anniversary Trail. It can be done. We can dedicate streets to bicycle connection points. We can, of course, do better bike lanes in the junction itself, down some of the major roads. So I love the question. My focus in bike tracks is all about extending the network and connecting. And of course, the big one two big ones that we all might know about and would love to see is the Box Hill to Hawthorn Trail right along the train reserve. Now, VicTrack is perhaps the biggest culprit in not using the land on the side of the train tracks. It's a disgrace that there is meters and meters of vacant land on the side of train lines that could be an awesome bike track or trail and aren't used. And it's because VicTrack control or own that land, and they have designated that easement as a train easement. What we ought to do is lobby state government to say, let's change the definition of that easement on the side of the railway line to a transport easement. And that simple change of definition might mean that we can then argue, hey, a transport link or transport easement is for bikes and people as well as trains. So VicTrack we need to really lobby hard on VicTrack and perhaps the state government to change that definition so we can free up land on the side of train lines to do more bike tracks. And the other one, of course, is the tail. We might have all heard of the Vic Road site in Kew. It's a bit out of our area, but it has a long slither of land that used to be the train line from the circular train line that extended through Kew. The state government wants to do a whole line of houses there. I think we should resist that and argue for a linear bike trail that would connect Hawthorn to Kew. So they're two examples, or three examples, if you like, of real opportunities that we can connect our network of bike trails.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. The state government, we've talked about the activity centres, but what vision do you have for supporting electric car uptake in that model, given that we're going to have a large number of apartment dwelling living in that area?
Oh, another good question. I've clearly got to get to a few more lighter footprints sessions and inspired me to be more active in this space. Yeah, look, we drive electric car, love it. I'm never going back. For those of you who might have made the move or contemplating it, I couldn't recommend it more highly. To drive around on a battery that can be recharged from my solar panels on the roof it makes me feel very proud, to be frank. And we ought to be doing what we can at a council level to encourage greater electrification, not only of our cars, but our houses and our buildings as well. What could we do to lead attitudinal change in converting to EV cars? Well, I think the car market's probably doing a pretty good job there itself. It is largely beyond council's remit, but again, that environmental education campaign on the inside of rubbish bins, promoting, for example, the use of, let's say, free EV chargers. There are a few popping up. We can do more. They take a bit of work because you've got to have substations that like to have, three-phase power, etc. But we should be dedicating parts of our council-owned car parks and properties to EV charging stations, as an example. I'm trying to think of other. Certainly at council level, we ought to move to a complete EV fleet, within a modest amount of time. No reason why every car that's driven around by Boroondara Council shouldn't be a fully electric vehicle, including our utes and our service vehicles. You don't need a diesel ute, folks. You can have an electric one. So there are perhaps two examples: better EV charging stations, better public awareness, and I think a EV council fleet in a short amount of time.
Okay. And there's one on how could the council influence distribution of education funding to be more equitable? Currently, private schools take out significant advertising space where state schools are underfunded.
Oh, respectfully, it's not a council issue. I think council need to stick to what's in their remit, and education, high school education funding is not one of them, to my knowledge.
Okay. Do you see a role for council in providing advice and guidance for installing solar and batteries, changing from gas to electricity, insulation, all of those things which could make our homes more effective?
Yes, I do, and I think Electrify Boroondara has been a terrific example of that. It's apolitical. It's been well attended. It's a great concept because it invites the private sector into to effectively sell their wares, and lets the private sector educate the public about their products and their services. I've volunteered for the last couple of years at Electrify Boroondara and Hawthorn, and it's growing, and it's a terrific example of how council can again help lead attitudinal change. So we don't need to sell solar panels ourselves. We don't need to run around with a team of installation people ourselves. The private sector can do all that and do it well. What council can do is lead attitudinal change by helping run these sort of forums, by educating the public, and helping the societal shift to electrification. Yeah, and as I said, we should be doing that in all of our buildings, and leading by example in that way as well.
Okay. I think the next one is probably one that we can answer, which is I could not find out who's standing for Junction Ward and how many can be elected. There are 2 people standing for Junction Ward. There's Mal Osborne-Smith, who can talk underwater, to quote him, and Di Gillies. So that's the answer to that one.
David, we have a few questions, suggested questions from Lighter Footprints. Would you like me to put any of those up?
Go for it.
I think we've reached the end of the audience questions. We can go through a few of those. Yes. Would you like to run through one or two?
Sure. So there's just a few, Mel. So probably it'll be short and sharp answers, I think, is all that's required from a range of different areas. So first one, should council perform citizenship ceremonies on Australia Day?
I'd like to do more research into that. I think it's a good question. It's a question that ought to be asked and ought to be debated, but it is potentially a divisive issue, and it's something I'd like to educate myself better in. I do, however, sorry, you've asked for the answer to be short, but I think there is a real case to look at a different date for Australia Day. At the end of the day, the 26th of January was a date that, Arthur Phillip stuck a flag in a colony in New South Wales, and I don't think that makes necessarily for an Australia as a nation that we can celebrate. In fact, for the last 50 years, the Australia Day has changed several times, so we don't need to be so precious about that date. So if that helps answer the question, perhaps indirectly, then I'm certainly up for that debate at council.
That's good. Thanks for that answer. Is homelessness a problem in Boroondara? And if so, what can council do about it?
I plead ignorance about statistics on that. I would need to take that one on notice, do some more homework, and find out what the numbers are and what we might be able to do about it.
Mhm.
And I would think part of that answer would be engaging with state authorities, the police and social welfare organisations to do what they can for our residents.
Mhm. There's another one that's sort of similar. Is there enough social housing in Boroondara? And if not, what can be done about it?
Yeah, good question. Very topical. Again, I don't know the statistics on what numbers of social housing there are in Boroondara. I would think whatever it is, it's probably not enough. Um, uh, and let's not forget the difference, of course, between social housing and affordable housing. There is a difference, of course. So I think it's a good question. Perhaps our council ought to educate themselves better about what we have in our municipality, how we are or are not contributing enough to the social housing solution for Greater Melbourne and Australia, and what, if anything, at a council level we can do about it. I suspect it comes down to land. It comes down to development permits. It comes down to supporting a percentage of new dwellings to be social housing, and I think that's a good model
Okay, thank you.
by and large.
Thanks, Mel. You've kind of made mention of some of this too, but how would you as a councillor act to minimise the impact of the North East Link on the citizens of Boroondara?
Yeah, it's a huge project, isn't it? I haven't studied the impacts of it in great detail, to be frank. I know it's a huge concern for many residents in the north. Um, Huge state government project that's again out of the remit of council to be able to influence the design and the layout of it. How could we mitigate its impact? It's being a powerful advocate and a powerful stakeholder in the around the table to state government about the issues that affect our municipality. For example, landscaping and the landscaping plan. For example, my little idea about greening our noise walls. Every noise wall along a freeway ought to be, I think, a green wall of vines or whatever. They can do it in Singapore. They can do it throughout Asia. I don't know why we have miles of concrete canyons. That might be an example of improving, just even moving the dial a little bit. Obviously, our bike paths and our open space, connections around that area are very important. Um, Perhaps there's some things that we might be able to work a little harder in influencing the final outcome. I know landscaping is often the sort of the last thing in these projects. Because the project's well and truly under construction and designs are well and truly set, but there may be the opportunity to influence and improve what we do from a landscaping and a bike path and pedestrian connection point of view. And perhaps I'd add to that water retention and water catchments as well.
Thank you. I've got one more, and then I see we've got one more in the chat for David. So my last one is, do you have one particular thing that drives you nuts about our current council that you'd like to fix?
Well, let me just focus on the Junction because it's a big municipality. As I said in my opening statement, the Junction needs to be rejuvenated now. We've talked and planned for decades, and we need to get on with it. So lack of action, particularly in the Junction, frustrates me and is the main or one of the main reasons I've decided to throw my hat in the ring and give it a crack. I know it's easy to promise things as a candidate. It's much harder to deliver. Politics is the art of the possible, not the perfect. So, I guess there's compromise and there's decisions that need to be made at a group level, at a council level, to get things done. But what drives me nuts is that for decades I've walked up and down the Junction in Camberwell and wondered why we can't do better. I've done better in some of my own projects and my activity centres and the like over my career, and I'd like to think we can just get on with a bunch of improvements. As I've said, I highlighted some of those before. A Christmas night market, fairy lights, better footpaths, activating our streets, repairing and restoring some of our heritage shop facades. On it goes. Not all of them are expensive. Not all of them should be controversial. We should get on with it. So that's perhaps what frustrates me the most.
Okay, thank you very much, Mel. We've got about 10 minutes left. So, David, do you think we can squeeze that last question in?
Well, there's actually 2 or 3, but anyway, what's being done in Junction Ward to make pavements better to walk on for elderly people? And in brackets, not cement or blue stone, and to retain parking places near the market. So, and there's a question that follows on, which is, and council enables seniors to remain in this area that is under threat with the plans. There isn't going to be a community that will enable us to stay in our homes. So those go together, I think.
Yeah, great question. I'm a passionate supporter of great urban spaces. I'll tell you a good example of where footpaths is in the city of Melbourne. Now, 20 years ago, they engaged a Greek contractor who loves paving to spend literally years slowly changing all of the footpaths up and down Collins Street and Burke Street and Swanson Street in Melbourne from bitumen to bluestone shaved pavers. By that I mean, the lovely bluestone that's as flat as this book. Not the cobblestones. They're no good for people to walk on. So bluestone pavers from one side of the shop to the gutter are flat, easy to walk on. You don't have to fear tripping. You can use wheelchairs and devices, so great for less able bodies. It adds incrementally to the width and the use of the footpath, so you don't have to clutter the footpath with signs and no standing signs and seats and lots of obstacles. So yes, bluestone widened footpaths I think is essential backbone to greater urban amenity, and the shops will flourish because of that. People will come to the streets and use them because of that. It's a simple thing, but a good footpath can really make a huge difference to the life of residents and to the success of businesses on it, I believe. And I'd do the same for laneways, if I can add that. We've got all of these laneways and little roads around the junction that are at the moment just delivery roads for shopkeepers to, bring their sack of potatoes in once a day. We could repave those laneways. And there's a good example near the dumpling restaurant in the junction. It's one of the very few laneways that's actually been paved. We could do that throughout the junction. We could regulate traffic so delivery times is only between certain hours. And that way we have a pedestrian walkway unencumbered by cars and delivery vehicles for everyone to use without having to fight your way around car parks and up and down little bitumen footpaths. That's what I'd do as well.
Thank you.
Do we have time for one more, do you think?
One quick one and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I wonder whether there are opportunities for local, state and federal government to cooperate more effectively. Is this something that you would that could be encouraged for council?
Yes, in short, there are numerous areas of council's responsibility that overlap with state and federal government, and I might also add with other councils. We I think work in silos too much, where we all try to do our own strategy and our own plans, and we don't stop and listen to what other councils have done. So as an example, Frankston Council have done a very good real-time transparency website that enables any viewer to track council's decisions in real time and their expenditure on any item. So let's not reinvent the wheel. If it's done well there and it works well and it's supported by residents, let's just copy it. It's like the Mikey. Why we had to invent our own Mikey system when we could have just copied something in from Hong Kong or Singapore or Vienna or 100 other cities in the world which use trams, which have this system. I don't understand. Cooperating better, yeah. Let's think at council what areas we can leverage off state government and federal government. I'm thinking funding. I'm thinking this activity centre is something we should go in really hard to say, okay, state government, you want 67,000 new homes. We don't. But what we do need is a couple of $100 million to put, for example, the car park outside Woolies, the Station Street car park, underground. It could be done. Engineering wise, it would be a pain for 10 years or 5 years. I get that. But could you imagine a world in Campbell Junction where all of the car parking for that car park was underground, and on top was a green, New York Central Park with trees and open space? It'd be life-changing, and it would be city building stuff. We can't afford it at council, but maybe with better cooperation with state government, better lobbying, we might be able to put that on the longer term plan for our city.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mel, that you've done a power of talking tonight and shared with us your many ideas, and also identified some topics that you're keen to learn more about, and wanting to listen to other people with more experience about. So that's great too. We wish you well with the rest of your campaigning, and just want to let everyone know that if you want to put any of your questions to Di Gillies, you can contact her directly. Her contact details will be up on the VEC website, but if anyone has any trouble getting in touch with her and wants to follow up anything, and I'm guessing the same goes for you, Mel, if people have any follow-up questions, they can contact you directly.
Yes, please do. I'll do my best to answer them, and I would be delighted to hear from anyone who is interested.
Great. And once again, thank you all very much for coming tonight. It's, I think, been a very rich and productive conversation. Thank you all.
Julie, can I just finish by saying thank you for your part in hosting tonight, and David and the team at Lighter Footprints, and thank you everyone who's listening. I can't see everyone's names, but for those of you who have bothered to tune in, who've genuinely got some real environmental issues at your conscience, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to talk at you for 20 minutes, and I hope what I've said might resonate with a few of you, and I hope you might be able to support me in my campaign to do what I can for the Junction.
Thanks very much, Mel. Good night, everyone.
Yeah.
Good night.
Yeah.